Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, so maybe we'll start today's lecture. Okay, so what we have seen till yesterday or till last lecture, we will brief little bit. So in last lecture, we were talking about 5S gene. So this 5S gene is important in making large subunit of ribosome. As you can see here, this is the 5S RNA, which is produced from 5S DNA. And this makes the large subunit of or 60S ribosomal subunit. Now, apart from this 5S gene, it is composed of 5.8 and 28 sRNA. And actually, this is produced via different premature rRNA. And I can show you here. So this is one premature ribosomal RNA, and the whole gene content is here. For example, 18S DNA, 5.8 and 28S is formed from this pre-transcript. So basically, there are two different polymerases which are forming these two different separate rRNA. So what we were talking about in our last lecture was about 5S DNA. Okay, so if we see closely that your clusters of 5.8, 18S and 18S, 5.8 and 28S are coming from this rDNA cluster, as you can see here, and the polymerase 1 is responsible. Even you have to note the position where it is transcribing. For example, this unit comes from the nucleolus region, whereas your 5S RNA is made into the nucleoplasm. So this is whole your nucleus region, and this is within the nucleus region you have nucleolus where you have rRNA DNA RNA coming from. So once it is forming your mature rRNA products, then it is cleaved further and processed further. So this processing is not exactly like splicing, because in splicing you have to remove the internal content and then you have to join the two exonic sequences. Whereas these kind of processing is mainly towards the end. So basically the end region has extra sequences, regulatory sequences. These are chopped off, and once they are processed, these are further modified. Some of the bases are modified within 18S, 5.8S and 28S. So this then further goes out of the nucleus and they assemble in your premature 40S component, which is basically found by your 18S ribosomal RNA, and then your premature 60S, which is the largest subunit, is made by your 5.8S and 28S, and then the 5S RNA is coming from the nucleoplasm to be bound in this position, right? So basically then they go out of the nucleus in the cytoplasm where exactly your protein translation takes place, and this further happens. So here the polymerase 2 position is shown where you have mRNA transcription going on, and then you have some small nuclear RNA which is responsible for ribosomal protein formation and protein DNA RNA ribonucleoprotein complexes formation. So this I thought of giving this picture because last time there was some confusion like why we are talking about 5S RNA and what is the reason. So in last lecture, what we talked about is 5S DNA, like 5S gene, and we talked about Xenopus laevis, where from Xenopus laevis, this transcription factor, namely transcription factor 3A, was purified, and this purification was basically from two different units, one from somatic and one from egg. Basically two different 5S DNA was made in plasmid formation, and then based on this purification it was seen whether there was any transcription going on or not. So this is what we have seen till last lecture. So before this transcription, that means we have seen that you have 5S DNA and there is some factor. So this is the transcription factor which is binding to the 5S gene. This is what we have seen in last lecture. Okay. So now moving further. So what I have depicted here in this region, this is your transcription factor in green, and what you see here is probably 5S DNA. You can assume that this is 5S DNA. Now, before this paper of David Engelke that we have discussed last time, there were other scientists who actually purified 5S RNP complexes. For example, this is one 5S RNP complexes, and from these 5S RNP complexes, they all purify bound proteins from these complexes. For example, this green material here. So when they purified this green material, they were able to, form that this is forming one complete so they extracted this 5S material and they ran on the gel. So from running of the gel, they could find out that there is one molecule within this 5S RNP molecule, and this probably is acting as 45 kilodalton protein, which is bound in the RNA. So this is your DNA of 5S RNA, and this is your RNA. 5S RNA. And on top of this RNA, you have bound protein, and that is why you have RNP complexes, ribonucleoprotein complexes, where you have RNA and protein complexes. And when you purify this complex, then you see that there is one protein which is binding to this complex, and the molecular weight, what you see in this case, is around 45 kilodalton, right? So this was the work which was shown by Picard and Wenzen 1 year ahead of the Engelke paper. So now, one important thing at this point was that many people actually isolated this 7S molecule, and they all actually showed different, molecular weight. We will come to that. So they all showed that this molecule has different running patterns. Somewhere showed that this is around 35 kilodalton. Some people showed it is around 45 kilodalton. So there were a variant running pattern, and we will come to that in our lecture. So now, in 1980, this Pelham and Donald Brown, so these both scientists actually showed that 5S RNA can inhibit its own synthesis. And moreover, they were able to show that 5S RNA inhibits its own competition with your 5S DNA. For example, with this kind of graph, you can see that there are different effects of concentration of DNA, 5S DNA, which inhibits your 5S RNA synthesis. For example, in this case, you have plasmid coming from frog, and this is coming from somatic cells. So this is for 5S DNA in the plasmid, and they want to show with the help of in vitro transcription assays that how much 5S RNA is produced. Similarly, they have here a plasmid where you have incorporation of tRNA, okay, as a plasmid form. So when you have the similar amount of tRNA and the similar of 5S DNA, you initially see a very large amount of 5S RNA production. Here, this is around 100 and this is around only 50. So at the start, you have only small amount of tRNA, whereas in comparison, you have 10 times larger amount of 5S RNA production. Whereas if you start putting small amount of RNA material, 5S RNA material, then you see a very sharp decline, especially in the first 10 microgram region. So you have a very sharp decline of 5S RNA production, as you can see here in 1, 5, 25, and even small amount in 50. So basically you can see specifically in 1 microgram or 5 microgram, the effect is very drastic, that you have strong reduction in your RNA production, especially in 5S RNA production. Whereas not so much of decline is there in your tRNA. In fact, 1 microgram, there is not at all any decline in the 5S RNA production. In the case of tRNA, there's no decline in the tRNA production. So that was the effect. And what they presume from this whole experiment, that if you have 5s DNA, for example, this is 5s DNA, and especially you have 5s RNA produced. So this 5s RNA and the same 5s DNA is making competition for binding of transcription factor. So this is the transcription factor that they are telling. So I'm writing here as a transcription factor 3. So as more number of RNA is produced, then you have more binding of transcription factor to the RNA material, and same transcription factor is not available for the binding at the 5s DNA site. So there is a lot of competition going on at the DNA and RNA level. So this is the findings they found between these two. And as I said, that important thing apart from these two was the change in the molecular weight. For example, when several scientists isolated this molecule, they found there was a molecular weight difference. And this is what they uh, analyzed further. For example, for Phelan and Brown, they still found or still thought that this molecule, what is shown here in RS molecule, is equivalent to your 5s molecule, which is binding to 5s DNA. So in order to find that, they actually performed several experiments, and they proved further that these two molecules are indeed the same transcription factor, which is binding to 5s DNA. Now, what you see here is the gel picture from Picard and Venez paper, that this molecule of transcription factor, or which was bound to 5s 7s RNP complexes, they gave around 45 kilodalton protein, whereas this is the purified protein which David Engelke in our last lecture we have seen, that this is the 37 kilodalton. So in order to actually find whether these two proteins are similar, now they wanted to compare whether these two proteins are similar or not. Okay, so what they did, and they performed several assays. First of all, when you have this kind of oocytes present, then you have several molecules of RNP complexes. Here, 42S RNP complex and 7S RNP complex. They actually isolated this complex, and I should tell you that what are there, they presume that there are also some kind of proteins which is also matching to around 45 kilodalton. So for example, you have already seen that transcription factor is somewhere around 45 kilodalton or 40 kilodalton. At the same time, 40S RNP complexes, it was found to be bound by tRNA, and then P43 and P48 complexes were also formed there. And then they also isolated protein molecules from 7s molecules. So they wanted to study what are the parameters, or what are the molecules or specific amino acids they are made up of. So they isolated this and purified these complexes. Okay, so at this point, it is important to tell you two things here. For example, and what they did, for example, they isolated this 45S protein, they isolated transcription factor, and they compared with the purified protein. So this was the purified protein they obtained from David Engelke in their paper. So this protein they had already achieved, that they got from the this group. Now, and this is one important slide, and I want to actually explain here that in protein chemistry, there are a lot of times it happens that when you run a gel, so your proteins are not running exactly at the point or exactly at the molecular weight you want to run at. For example, even one of my colleagues last year was telling that he has a protein, once it runs around 25, once it runs around 35 kilodalton. So this kind of behavior happens especially in SDH gels when you run through a protein, basically because some of your proteins or peptides amino acid gets oxidized, and especially in this you have cysteine molecules, and the um, um, residues within the cysteine SH molecule, SH group. So this actually gets oxidized, and because of that, you have different running pattern. So what happens, especially when you are involved in such kind of protein which gives you a different running pattern, it is important to actually maybe check whether you have a lot of differences because of the oxidizing agents in that. So what they did in Pelham and Brown, they used one component called iodoacetate. So I will write it here. Acetate. So this is a specifically alkyling agent. So if sorry, if I form this something like this, you have. So what it does, this iodoacetates actually reacts with your cysteine molecules, and this reaction actually, what it does, the cysteine molecule SH groups, it prevents this SH molecule to reform this disulfide bonds. So this doesn't make it to reformation, because many other reducing agent you might be knowing that if you run a SDS gel, you involve a lot of reducing agent. Even after that, some of the SDS oxidizing agent can reoxidize this molecule, and because of that, you have different running pattern. But this is an irreversible agent, which if it modifies this disulfide molecules, and it doesn't allow this disulfide molecules to recombine and reform the disulfide molecules. So this is how the iodoacetates actually works. So this is important. So this is one thing. And second thing, I should also explain here that there are several chemicals one can use for the protein chemistry. For example, in last 2-3 lectures, we have been talking about your Edmonds reagent. So we have seen that Edmonds reagent. Then we have cyanogen bromide. So what this Edmonds reagent does, it actually removes your N-terminal amino acid, and you are able to sequence with the Edmonds reagent one by one. What cyanogen bromide does, actually it cleaves the methionine, the C-terminal section from the methionine is cleaved. So specifically you get some kind of pattern, right? So these are the agent you use specifically for knowing what kind of amino acids are there in your polypeptide chain. Then apart from that, you have lot of endopeptidase. For example, we have seen largely, we have seen trypsin. So trypsin actually cuts after C terminus of your arginine and your lysine. This we have seen. Then we also may see the chymotrypsin. So what chymotrypsin does, it cleaves after your aromatic amino acid, phenylalanine, tyrosine, then you have tryptophan. So these all the cutting sites are there. So apart from that, you also have some kind of elastase endopeptidase. So this cuts after glycine and your alanine, basically small amino acids. So all these kind of different peptidase or different reagents are used to find out what kind of polypeptide chains are there in a bigger protein molecule. And basically if one doesn't work, and if you, with one kind of enzyme you are not able to see that what are the polypeptide chain, then basically you try to incorporate another polypeptide chain, uh, another enzyme, and then basically with two different or two or three different enzymes, you see a pattern that where exactly what kind of chains you are seeing, and basically then you try to prepare a map. So basically with that map, you are able to find out how big your chains are and where exactly these proteins are coming. Not exactly the sequences, but more or less you find out that how many lysines, how many methionine, and how many glycine, alanine, these kind of amino acids are present in your whole polypeptide chains. So these things are used basically in your assays. So what they did, basically the story was that they had two different protein. One was running at 37 kilodalton and another which was running at 45 kilodalton. And in their view, they both are similar. So that is what they are trying to find out in this. So what they did here, so this is the iodoacetate labeling of the gel. So this A part is the iodoacetate labeled gel. So here in one lane is a control which is creatine kinase. So they have used creatine kinase because the molecular weight of creatine kinase is around 40 kilodalton. Then in lane 2 you have purified 7S protein. So this 7S RNP complexes, from there you have purified protein. And then the 7S molecule itself was totally isolated, and from there you have the protein isolated. So basically these two remain similar. One is purified form where another is 7S molecule is whole purified, and from there you have protein molecule coming out of them. And this what you see here is your 42S molecule. So this is the orange molecule which I have shown here, 42-1, and other is coming from the 7S molecule. So this they ran into the gel, and what you see in lane 5 is the purified molecule. This molecule in large excess quantity. They wanted to check how purified this protein is, so they loaded it in a large amount. So basically they could show that these proteins are highly pure and none other bands are coming into the picture. So after seeing this, they actually digested it with a different kind of enzyme. Here they digested it with a chymotrypsin. So what you see here in lane 6 is the purified protein they got from David Engelke. For example, this is the transcription factor 3A that they had already seen from the David Engelke lecture paper. So this is the purified protein. Then these two are, one is which was running at around 45 kilodalton and one was running at around 37 kilodalton. So these two, basically these two proteins which they have profiled, they actually digested it with the chymotrypsin. And with this kind of assay, what they were able to figure out that the pattern or the fragments what they are getting, especially lane 6, lane 7 and lane 8, they match appropriately with the purified transcription factor 3A. So basically with this kind of assay, they were able to say that these proteins are very much exactly similar, whereas the 42S protein, where the obtained protein was around 40 kilodalton, also 45 and 40, between 43 kilodalton. When they digested this with chymotrypsin, it gave a very different pattern, as you can see here. So basically, although it was of similar size of around 30 or 43 kilodalton, but they did not get exactly similar pattern like in lane 6, 7 and lane 8. So with this kind of assay, they were able to conclude that the purified protein from 7S matched exactly with the transcription factor, but not with the 42S purified proteins of similar size, similar protein size. So basically what they are showing that this is not exactly similar than your transcription factor. Then after purifying this, their next question was whether these purified proteins are able to bind exactly like the 5S DNA, whether this protein which is binding or which they have isolated from RNA or RNP complex, whether the same protein in vitro experiments, they are able to bind in the purified 5S DNA. And obviously with this kind of assay, they performed footprinting assays. And I will just give you the name. I will not explain in detail. But what you see here is your, nothing is added here. So this is the control lane. Then you have 7s RNP molecule. 7s RNP molecule, that means you have RNA together with your protein, right? Then in this lane 6, you have 7s RNP molecule, that means you have RNA together with your molecule, but with this you have addition of RNAs. So as you know, RNase is able to degrade all your RNA. So all this extra RNA will be degraded. And what you have basically in this lane C is your purified protein. And then in lane D, you have only RNase as a control, that RNase is not able to bind on this footprinting. So basically, when you analyze this kind of data, then you can see that only in lane C, you get a prominent protection of the site here, and this site corresponds exactly from 45 to 96 base pair. So RNP 5s RNP molecule is not able to bind. Only when it is removed from the RNA, this protein, purified protein, is able to bind and gives protection, whereas RNase alone is also not able to bind here. Now the same kind of assays they performed with your 42s RNP molecule. Yes. So with 42s molecule, I will show you here. So this is again 5s particle. Then what you have here in lane F, you have 7s with your RNase molecule. Then you have 42s, then 42s with RNA molecule. Here you have nothing. And then here you have purified, this is lane J. Then you have purified RS protein. So just the protein here. So again, when you see nothing, this is nothing here, lane I, then in lane J, you have only protein. This protein is able to give protection here, whereas none of the 42s molecule, either alone or in the presence of RNase, is able to give you any protection on the footprinting assays, right? So with this, they are able to say that 42s is not able to bind, but 7s protein is able to give you a lot of protection within the 5s DNA. So that means it is binding to the DNA. And then K and L lane is another experiment where you have a purified protein. So you have purified protein, you mix with your 5s RNA. That means you allow this combination to occur, and then you see whether there is any protection. So there is no protection because they two bind each other, and this is molecule is not free to bind on the DNA because the competition is more towards your RNA binding, right? And then in this case, you have 42 sRNA, and then you have purified protein, that is the same protein transcription factor. That means this protein is not able to bind to your 42 sRNA, but this protein is free to bind to your DNA, and that's why you see a good protection, especially at this region. And then you see a footprinting assay or the protection of the DNA assay. So with this, they were able to say that the protein they isolated from 7s RNP and the transcription factor that binds with the DNA, they are exactly similar kind of protein. So this was their conclusion, and from the footprinting assay, they were able to show that this transcription factors binds in the center region of the gene. For example, it binds from 45 to 96 base pair. So this is able to bind to the center region of the gene, and then it requires for the initiation of the transcription. For example, they have also checked whether it is involved in the transcription or not. So this was their finding. So they said that this transcription factor is required for the transcription. It binds to the DNA. It also binds to 5s RNA. And basically, it is kind of feedback mechanism that if more RNA is produced, that means this transcription factor is not able to bind to the DNA. That means there is less amount of RNA. So somehow its own regulation is controlled by this transcription molecule. So is it clear till now? We have finished actually is one paper, two paper especially, where one was 37 kilodalton protein and another was 45 kilodalton, and they showed that they both are similar. Now moving ahead from this, uh, yeah, this we have covered. Dual binding inhibits its own DNA. Now, in year 1984, another scientist, namely Smith, Douglas Smith, he carried out analysis on the transcription factor. So basically, the molecular weight by this time was approximately 40. So instead of 45, 37, so exact molecular weight was found at around 40 kilodalton. And now he wanted to study this protein, and for that again, as I mentioned earlier, so you have lots of proteolytic enzymes, and he actually digested this enzyme with different enzymes, and what he found that your 40 kilodalton transcription factors are digested into 30 and 20 kilodalton fragments after 2 to 3 hours with the proteolytic fragments. Now what he did, he actually isolated or purified this independent fragments here, 40, 30 and 20 kilodalton. As you can see here, these are the purified fragments. And on top of this purified fragments, he again performed cyanogen bromide cleavage. So what you see here is the cyanogen bromide cleavage fragments coming from 20 kilodalton. This is 30 kilodalton and this is 40 kilodalton. So when 20 kilodalton was cleaved with the cyanogen bromide, and this cyanogen bromide cleaves or hydrolyzes on the C side of the methionine group. So what you see here, you see basically two prominent bands from 20 kilodalton. One is C, this cyanogen bromide 3, fragment number 3. This is fragment number 3, and this is the open end. This is not labeled anything here, and this is the 20 kilodalton rest over of 20 kilodalton. Now similarly, when 30 kilodalton was incubated with the cyanogen bromide, you get cyanogen bromide fragment number 1, then you have cyanogen bromide fragment number 3. And these are the partial fragments. That means it is not digested completely. So these are the partial digested fragment number A and number B. So when 40 kilodalton was digested with cyanogen bromide, then you basically receive three fragments, 1, 2, and 3. And by molecular weight, it was found that this is around 11 kilodalton and this is around 20 kilodalton. And basically, factor. Now they wanted to check which of this fragment, who is recording 2 times. Yes.
Ma'am, your thing was stuck. So I think around 2 minutes back,
Okay.
the last
But now it's
slide.
fine.
Yeah, it's fine now.
Should I repeat it again?
I think so.
So what you see here are the cyanogen bromide fragments coming from 20 kilodalton, coming from 30 and coming from 40 kilodalton. And basically after cyanogen bromide fragment, you actually map this based on your fragments coming out from the cleavage factors. So what you see here that you have fragment number 3 around 9 kilodalton, and then fragment number 2 is around 11 kilodalton, and then you have in between, because the total molecular weight is around 40 kilodalton. So altogether you get this map of 40 kilodalton. Now they wanted to, somebody's mic is on. Tanya, please switch off your mic. So now after this, they wanted to check which of these fragment is binding to the DNA. And basically, again, they performed footprinting assays. And what you see here is 40 kilodalton, then 30 kilodalton and 20 kilodalton protein. So basically, like the wild type, this 30 kilodalton is able to bind your DNA. So whose mic is on? Okay, thank you. So now the same exercise they did on non-coding strand and on coding strand. So on coding strand, if you see these two molecules behave exactly similar. For example, 40 and this is 30 and this is 20. So that means the 40 and 30 kilodalton fragments are exactly binding like a transcription factor, whereas your 20 kilodalton, Dinesh Kumar, please switch off your mic. So now in the coding strand, they have binding. So specifically, you must see here that the 20 kilodalton have partial binding. For example, they only bind towards the 3' end of the internal control region of 5S DNA sequence. So this is what they figured out, that 20 kilodalton parts. Now, after the binding, they wanted to check which of these fragments. So I have represented here as a 40 kilodalton, half as a 30, and then specifically smaller as a 20 kilodalton. Now they wanted to check which of these fragments are able to perform the transcription assays. So for that, what you have in vitro transcription assays. So they performed in the case of buffer, they mixed this plasmid together with a transcription buffer. And here, so in the presence of this cell extract, it is not able to give any transcription. The transcription will happen only when you have extragenous transcription factor occurring. So when they perform this kind of assay, what they found that lane 1 is your 40S molecule. For example, the 40S transcription factor is able to produce your 5S RNA. When you have the fragment, which is your 30S molecule, then the transcription occurs, but the limitation is there. Only 20% of transcription is happening compared to your wild type 40S transcription factor. Whereas when your 20S, where 20 kilodalton fragments was used, so there was no transcription occurring in the lane 3. So there is no transcription occurring. So basically the transcription or the binding comes from these two fragments and basically the 30 kilodalton fragments. So from this experiment, what they concluded that only 30 kilodalton has only 20% of transcription activity. Now the 20 kilodalton is totally inactive in this in vitro transcription, and therefore the 10 kilodalton, which is missing from this 30 kilodalton, is required for 5S transcription activity. Right. So this is what their conclusion was from this essays. So basically they are, so if you have seen FOC1 as well as transcription factor, what we are talking about, so they take the full protein, they chop off into the pieces, and then they analyze its smaller domains, that whether the smaller domains are also working exactly as a wild type, or the wild type activity, for example, the transcription activity, which is coming from the wild type, in which of these smaller fragments this activity is residing. And for that reason, they always go on deleting this thing even in any kind of molecule. When you study this, either you also prepare N-terminal deletion, C-terminal deletion, or drastic deletion from the endo sequences, like you chop off some of the deleted mutants inside the protein, and then you check off its activity, especially in the functional assay, for example, in transcription assay. So from this, they were able to find out these kind of details. Now they wanted to check whether they are binding to the DNA in a single case, or they are mixing. So all this, for example, what they did in this essay, for example, they have DNA and then they mixed it to either 40 kilodalton fragment, then again they have mixed the DNA, then they incubate it with the 30 kilodalton, and then again you have DNA and you mix with the 20 kilodalton fragment. And now on top of that, you either mix it with 30 or you mix it with a 20. Similarly, you mix it either with 30 or you mix it with a 20 kilodalton. So this kind of assays will give you that whether this protein is able to bind only one molecule of 40S or it is also binding with the 30 fragments. So whether it is making a homodimer or heterodimer kind of proteins. And how you will analyze this kind of assay? You will go for EMSA kind of, or even denaturing SDS page kind of analysis. So next what you see is this concept where you have in lane 1 you have 40 kilodalton fragment, right? So what you see here is the DNA, RNA, DNA protein mix. So what you get here is the complex for 40S kilodalton. Then what you have here in lane 2 is around 30 kilodalton, and what you see in lane 3 is your 20 kilodalton protein mixed with the oligonucleotides. So what you see here is only one molecule is bound to the domain. And when this was mixed with the, for example, this is mixed with 40 and this is also mixed with the 20. So in this case, you see two different fractions. For example, one for the 20, which is exactly similar, this two, this is 20 plus the oligonucleotide, and this is exactly similar like 40 at the 40. That means this is only forming your homodimer. That means one DNA is bound to your 40 kilodalton and then another fraction which is bound to your 20 kilodalton fraction. But if there was any heterodimer, then you would expect something in between. That means only one DNA where you have 40 also bound and then you have also 20 kilodalton fragments is bound. But this kind of heterodimer formation we did not see anywhere. So what you see here is fraction which is mixed with the two oligonucleotide. And similarly here what you see is 40 plus your 30 kilodalton. And the same as a control, they used PBR322, which does not have any binding site for the transcription factors. So these transcription factors were not able to bind to any of the sequences. Now, based on these results, for example, the cleavage pattern from cyanogen bromide and then heterodimer formation, so they were able to actually give the sequences. For example, here from this assay, they were able to say only mixture of original sized proteins were formed, and then there were no complexes of intermediate mobility. So that means there is no intermediate formation as I shown here, and the original size proteins were able to form in these cases. So what you see in the end is the location of cyanogen bromide cleavage sites. From 20 kilodalton, you have one cleavage exactly at this position, and from 30 kilodalton, you have cleavage at two positions. So one at this position, one at this position. And then from this whole experiment, or they were able to say that the fragments are projected onto 5S DNA, and according to footprinting, they were also able to bind to this RNA sequences. So coming to the conclusion, what we have seen from today's experiments and last experiment, that the transcription factor 3A binds to 5S RNA and it also binds to 5S DNA. Now, transcription factors contain three structural domains, that is 20, 30, and 10. That means 20 kilodalton form at one end and two smaller kilodalton at the another end. So, for example, from this cyanogen bromide cases, so here you have around 9 to 10 kilodalton, and then in between you have 20 kilodalton, this size from one cyanogen bromide cleavage to another, and again you have around 10 kilodalton fragments. So basically you have 3 fragments coming out from this whole cleavage assay. So this is what it is represented here, 2 smaller fragments at the other end. Now 20 kilodalton domain contains the sequence specific DNA binding site that recognizes the key nucleotides in the 3' site of the control region. This we have seen in the footprinting assays where 20 kilodalton was able to bind only the 3' site of the footprinting DNA site in the inter. Now 20 kilodalton by itself is not sufficient to activate gene transcription, and that means adjacent 10 kilodalton is required for the in vitro transcription assays. So again, this we have seen in vitro transcription assays that it was not required. Now the third 10 kilodalton does not bind directly to the DNA, but it is responsible for most of the transcription enhancing activity. So this is what we have seen in the 30 kilodalton basically in this kind of assay. So where they say that 30, which is missing from the 30 kilodalton, is required for the initiation activity, because here you see a very less amount of transcription going on. So this is the outcome about the transcription factor. And so basically first I should ask whether you have any questions related to this lecture, from this lecture. We can take up questions, and maybe next lecture and next to lecture would be important, because then you will be able to see from how from this transcription factor from proteolytic cleavage, then how the independent motifs were actually found out, and what were the sequences of the motifs, and how people deduce whether it is binding to zinc finger or it is not binding, or how these sequences were found. So it goes on interesting, like starting from isolating the enzyme or the factor from Xenopus, then proving that it is a transcription factor, then proving that it has independent units of 30 and 20, and then they go on finding that it has even a smaller units of 3 kilodalton, and how actually that can be independently formed as a zinc motifs. So that is what we see in next lecture. Okay, so now I rest here, and then you can ask questions if you have any. Please go ahead. Is the lecture clear or it's not? So because if you do not have any question, there are only two things. Either you have understood completely or you have not understood anything. So I don't know which one is the true, but yeah. Are you students very much stressed about the quiz and other things going on? Because it's a compressed situation. So what I could sense from 2 days back interaction, that you all are very much stressed about your quiz, because in one subject you have 2 or 3 quizzes coming along, right? So is that the reason, or? So nobody is interested in sharing or talking?
Yes,
Good afternoon, ma'am.
ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know about everybody else, but yes, it's a bit
Yes, ma'am.
overwhelming at times.
Okay.
There is one subject where we have assessments every week, and
Mm-hmm.
it's often the case that we have back-to-back assessments or assignment submissions on on course following days, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we are worried about how our grades will end up towards the end of the semester. And given the fact we all have very different circumstances at our places, for example, due to some electricity faults at my place, half of the day I don't have power. So I basically do most of my lectures from my phone, from a 5-inch screen. So
Okay.
yes, I am stressed about everything, and since this is
Yeah,
a
I
MTech
could.
program,
Hmm.
I can't afford to mess up even one exam, and I'm worried. Yeah.
Yeah, at least from my
Same
side,
here,
I can.
man.
Yes, I can
Same here.
understand.
Yes,
I
man.
can understand because even this is true from this side also, because sometimes power goes and we cannot, especially I can tell from my side, I cannot afford to be at home and taking lectures from home because there's no UPS and other things. At least I have to come, and then from here only I can take. And assessment, at least from my course, you can rest assured that if you have understood the subject, then question answering would not be a problem, because um, see, for us also, if you see or fit in our shoes also, it's difficult to grade students without seeing how they are performing. So just one quiz and other thing won't be sufficient. That is why this is the case, that most of the time 2 or 3 quizzes have been taken down, right? So that is the reason. So especially because, see, teaching is okay because we can teach online, but grading remains a issue. And especially this give me an opportunity to explain, at least from what I am planning for my course. Almost 1/3 has been covered, like POC 1 has been covered, and 2 lectures from zinc finger domain, including today's one, is done, right? So that means you know that how the way one is going into the subject, like starting from how it was discovered, then who carried out further, and what was the outcome. From each experiment, there is some outcome. Then how one went into the further knowledge gaining into the same subject, right? Now coming to your main thing, like your project, right? So I told you that I will be taking one quiz on 30th that will cover both subjects, like POC1 and transcription factor, zinc finger nucleases, these 2 things. And then main thing is your project thing. So that you will have to submit at least by, I gave one date, I think October or somewhere November, right? So before. So what I was thinking in that you propose one proposal, for example, one small research proposal using any of the technique, starting from FOC1 to zinc finger nucleases to TALEN or any CRISPR. So once I finish, because by the time I finish the whole lectures on all 4 subjects, you will be able to know that how zinc finger nucleases are working, how talents are working, and what is easier to create. Is it easier to create CRISPR or talent or zinc finger nucleases? Okay. So using any of the system, you can come up with your objective. For example, now you are working with any microbes, fungus, or plant, or any other system. So what basically will be your objective, that you have to decide. Okay, I will not give you any decision. You can create one small objective, and based on that objective, you can plan what will be your methodology of checking that objective. So in detail, and that should not be like an entire paper. So in entire paper, you see 2 3 things are done. Basically, I'm looking for only one objective, and how you are methodologically able to, justify that you will be able to judge that objective based on this method. Okay, so this is what I'm planning, and I will write accordingly for your research proposal, that you can create one research proposal, and then I will place. So basically, your major proportion of assessment will be done from that section. That means 20% comes from 20. I will have to check the assessment grade. I forgot now. So that portion will come, and basically then 30% comes from your different kind of assessment. One from quiz, one from midterm kind of examination, because there is no midterm, and third one is from your Viva. So this is what I am planning for my course. And believe me, what if you study the slides, this is enough for your examination purpose. You don't have to go too much detail in the papers I am uploading just because you are, if somebody is very much interested into the deeper knowledge of the subject, they can go and study the whole paper. I am happy about that, but obviously it requires a lot of time and investment, that also I know. Right. So if you study my slides and what are the outcomes of the slides, you would be able to know what kind of essays people do and what kind of experiments one can plan and how to analyze that experiments. So that is what my thinking and my process goes into it.
Ma'am, regarding the PDF handwritten notes provided by you,
Yes.
so is that sufficient, or we need to, like what I saw so far, it was just the description of the slides only. Like,
Yes, this is what I have done. So because many a times it can happen, because when I was writing it, so if you have the slide, if you don't know what is in the slides, and you can go through the hand notes and you can come to know what exactly it is. And sometimes if people do not have electricity and other things, that they can study from the hand notes. So that is why I provided the hand notes. But if you are attending the class, if you are attending the slides, I think this much is more than sufficient. And if you understood that, for example, when I say if you understood why trypsin was used, okay, if you understood that particular experiment, for example, in vitro transcription experiment, right? So if I say that only 30%, 10% was important, so why you are saying that 10% is important? Because there was less activity, and then this much, if it includes that, it also is important for your increment in the transcription essays. So these kind of things, if you understood, I think there should not be any problem in that. Am I clear?
yes, ma'am. Honestly speaking, I am facing an issue, that is, sometimes in some of the lectures it becomes like too much information for me, and when I attend the next lecture, I have a like tendency to forget what we discussed in the previous lecture. So, ma'am, is it possible that can you just in a brief, say in a nutshell, if the previous lecture can also be discussed before
I
starting a new
always,
lecture?
Kohelika,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
always discuss before I start one lecture. For example, in today's lecture, I started with this slide and then I started with this slide. So these two
Yes, ma'am.
slides are based on my previous lecture, that what we actually did in last lecture. We purified per transcription factor, specifically that binds to 5S DNA, right? This is what the in nutshell we did in last lecture. In these three slides, I just showed this. And this was the outcome of the last lecture, actually. So there was one person named David, and he actually took Xenopus laevis, and he was trying to find whether this transcription factor was bound to DNA. And he found that this transcription factor was binding to DNA. And then he described this, that where in the DNA, that is internal control region, this transcription factors was binding. So this was in nutshell about the last lecture. And I showed this diagram because many people said that why polymerase 3 was used, why not polymerase 1, and why tRNA was taken as a control, because tRNA is also involved by polymerase 3. So this kind of things to clear, I showed these three slides from the last lecture. And then I proceeded into the coming lecture. So from today's lecture, I should have started directly from here. Even here, I mentioned that the F5S DNA was bound with the transcription factor. Okay, so basically we are talking about, especially when we are talking about zinc finger nucleases or zinc finger proteins. So the whole story started with the transcription factor purification and then analysis of the purified or transcription factor.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, fine. Any other doubts?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, tell me.
Yes, so this is not exactly a doubt, but more of a request. Before
Yes.
the exam, could you just give 5 or 6 questions, which is representative of what we'll be facing in the exam? Not for focusing on them, but just to sort of calibrate what I have in my memory with what I'll be delivering on the exam. Just 5 questions.
Maybe I was thinking on that. What I presume your lecture will be 12th on Monday. Okay, 12th
Yes.
slide. So maybe that will be a shorter. I will try to finish faster, and then the rest of the 15-20 minutes I can invest on that. I was having this in mind already.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yes.
one Vishal,
Yes, Vishal.
one more request from my side. Uh, Ma'am, could you please give us the PDB code of all the molecules which are using? For example, last night I just wasted 2 hours just to see the structure of HIMF1, but I couldn't find that. I just found the FASTA file, but all sequence, but I couldn't find the structure. So
What structure you want from me?
HIMF1. No, ma'am, I want the important structures like for the PDB code for HIMF1, for example, or FOC1 enzyme, or whatever we
You
are using.
don't need a PDB structure. You don't need PDB structure for that.
Actually, I wanted to see the similarities why we were using HIMF1 in that we could have used other restriction enzymes now. So I just wanted to align those on
Okay. I
pi
understand
level.
what you
Yeah.
mean. I understand what you mean. So in one of the experiment, HINF1 was used as a control, right? So why that was used as a control and you wanted to see that? Is that
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Primary.
okay. So HINF1 doesn't have a binding site for FOC1, right? It doesn't have GG-ATG site. So that means, yes, that means if that protein is used in that case, that enzyme, HINF1 enzyme is used, that means it will not go and bind to that particular position. And that means FOC1 is still there or HINF1 will still be cutting that enzyme.
So, ma'am, my question was the why we choose HIMF1? Why not anything else?
You could have chosen anything else also that doesn't have a FOC1 restriction enzyme. You can choose anything else also in that paper. Specifically in that context, I mean to say. So where they are saying, see there are two experiments there. One is, so I request students who have further lectures, they can actually leave because time is 40 not 4:02. So the question was. One was FOC1 enzyme and another was HINF1, right? And on top of that, they are also adding FOC1 enzyme. So that means if FOC1 restriction site is already occupied by FOC1 enzyme, then even after incorporating another FOC1, this will not go and bind to the FOC1 site. That means it will not give any cleavage factor. That means it is hindering with the cleavage. But that is not the case with the HINFORM. This is what they predominantly showed in that paper, right? So apart from HINFORM, one could have used any other enzyme as well. But HINF1, if you see the cutting site and other, I would have to go to that lecture. It's not open, but you can see the cutting site also with the HINF1. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am, regarding the assessment examinations, regarding the quiz, I am saying, will
Yes.
it be of multiple choice questions or it can be without options as well?
It will be mixed of both. So it will be a multiple choice question. I wouldn't say maybe one word answers or fill in the blanks, or you have conceptual based questions that if I give you some fragments or some footprinting and diagram, whether you are able to see and deduce it, something like that.
Okay, and ma'am, one more query, like since we are just relying upon the internet connections at home. So it might be the case with like any one of us that if the quiz is being taken in certain duration of say 1 to 2 hours in a specific time, so like all of us might not be available at that same time, like internet issues or power cut, any issues might be there. So ma'am, will it be like though will there be anything optional for that we can submit within a certain deadline or within a certain time of the day?
For me, I was planning exactly like I take my lectures. For example, when I come here 3 to 4, I see at least 58 to 62 students are always present. For example, currently 55 students are there. So continuously 58 students are there. So basically, I was thinking that within 1 hour, I will not take more than 1 hour. So this will be done within 1 hour, and you should be able to finish your within 1 hour. So basically, if I extend, that will be like your time or some others subjects time will be incorporated. So I want to finish the quiz within 1 hour so that you write everything, you take PDF and then you upload in the Gmail account which has been provided. I will again provide it to you.
Okay ma'am, thank you.
Yeah. Any other queries? Okay. If everything is done, then thank you and see you tomorrow then, same time, 3 to 4.